Breaking tonight, Donald Trump about to join me for a live conversation. Hello and welcome to Justice. I'm Judge Jeanine Pirro. Thanks for being with us tonight. And now my opening statement. You know, Democrat-inspired government support for the last century has become the most abusive form of suppression and oppression in our inner cities. It is keeping African Americans and minority communities from attaining not only the American dream, but a normal, safe, secure, and productive life. A supposed well-intentioned support system is chaining our minority communities to an intergenerational cycle of poverty, dependency, and depression. Now, I've spent more than 3 decades in the criminal justice system, watching crime, drugs, and gangs ravage our inner cities, drawing no distinction between children, the weak, and the elderly. But I have never heard anyone, especially someone running for office, have the audacity, the tenacity to turn a paradigm upside down the way Donald Trump did this week.
It's time for our society to address some honest and very, very difficult truths. The Democratic Party has failed and betrayed the African American community. Democratic crime policies, education policies, and economic policies have produced only more crime, more broken homes, and more poverty.
Is he right? Let's take a look. When Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton talk about the racial divide, they neglect to talk about the fact that 58% of young African Americans do not have jobs. That, in fact, they are worse off since an African American president took office. So what makes anyone think things will get better under the same policies? When Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton talk about the economic divide in this country, what have they done about it, other than Hillary Clinton magically going from dead broke to being worth more than $100 million that she'll admit to, without a business, a company, or anything other than a so-called not-for-profit corporation? And while Obama and Clinton talk about those much-needed conversations between the minority community and our law enforcement officers, they do so to the background chant, "What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want them? Now." Today, more police are targeted and killed than ever before. And while Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton talk about the poor and the oppressed, the anarchists, Black Lives Matter, and Occupy Wall Street group burn down and destroy neighborhoods, where the only ones suffering are African-American mom-and-pop shops and African-American small business owners. And while they pontificate on the quality of justice for minority communities like Ferguson and Baltimore, juries, judges, and even their own Department of Justice outright reject their make-believe incendiary and divisive narrative. And in case you haven't noticed, gun crimes against African Americans in the inner cities only matter if law enforcement is involved. African American deaths, even of children on playgrounds on the south side of Chicago, just don't get the same outrage. And when this duo talk about the quality of education that young African American and minority children need to compete, they force an education bureaucracy and the unions that in turn support them, selling slick ads, while children in those communities drop out or fail on those families. No vision to help children like the lucky few who have experienced the voucher system or school choice that allows them to break the bonds of the inner city and soar their way to success. Now, take a look at these cities populated by the minority community, where murders are on the rise, where poverty is the norm, where guns are seen as the only form of protection, crime is the only way out, where hope is non-existent. And ask yourselves, Who is running these cities? Democrats. Take a look at the numbers. Chicago has had a Democratic mayor for the last 85 years. St. Louis, 67 years. Newark, 109 years. Milwaukee, 108 years. Baltimore, 49 years. And D.C., 41 years. All major cities, all where murders go up. Folks, if something just doesn't work time after time, over and over, what does it tell you? Should you keep going with it? Should you do it again? You know what? I can't say it any better than he can.
What the hell do you have to lose?
And that's my opening statement. Tell me what you think on my Facebook page or Twitter. Hashtag Judge Jeanine. And now, in a Justice exclusive, Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump joins me by phone. Good evening, Donald.
Hello, Jeanine.
You have had a banner week. I don't know how you do it, but you have given at least 4 or 5 major speeches. You have been to Louisiana. You just gave a speech this afternoon. And I couldn't help but focus on your Tuesday speech because it's my wheelhouse. So I want to ask you, do you believe that there is any chance for the inner cities to survive in light of where they are today?
Not with the people running them that are running them today, Jeanine. I mean, I know some of the people that actually are running them, and they couldn't care less. They just want the votes, and then after they get the votes, it's back to business as usual with special interests, and it's just not going to work. And the African-American people have been absolutely mistreated and abused by Democratic politicians who have taken advantage of them. And, you know, it was in my speech, and I really sort of just was reading the statistics where you have 40% that are living in poverty, 58% of the students, I mean, the young people, they can't get jobs. And, you know, it's just like a total catastrophe. The unemployment rates, everything is bad. No health care, no education, no anything. And poverty is unbelievable. And then I said, hey, wait a minute. Vote for me. What do you have to lose? I can't do worse. You can't do any worse than what these people have been doing, and I will do better. And actually said that if you vote for me the next time in 4 years, I'll get 95% of your vote because you're going to see such a big improvement. But I said to the African-American people in all of these cities, I just looked at those numbers. They're atrocious that you just put up. I said, vote for me. What do you have to lose?
But what would you do differently, Donald?
Well, I'd get jobs. For one thing, we're going to, you know, you need jobs. I'd also create spirit. We have a president who is absolutely a divider. I call him the great divider. And there is so little spirit, and there is such great division, and we need a cheerleader. I thought he was going to be a cheerleader. He's not a cheerleader. I mean, look at, as an example, he's up playing golf with his friends and doesn't know what's happening down in Louisiana. I was there. And I want to say it is so sad when you look at these houses that are absolutely destroyed. Even though they're standing, they have to be taken apart and put back together again.
Well, I have to tell you, Donald, my family lost a house in a flood, and it is horrible. But I did see there was a gentleman in Louisiana. It was on the internet. He was crying because he met you, and he couldn't believe that you actually went there and that he actually had the opportunity to meet you. But, you know, the president had no plans to go to Louisiana. And then after you were there yesterday, we now hear that he plans on going there next week. Do you think you shamed him into going?
Well, I don't know about that. Perhaps so. I'm not looking to have done that. But I will say this. I think next week is too late. Tuesday is too late. He's going to go on Tuesday. And I just think that you go. What you do is tell your golf buddies tomorrow morning that you won't be able to make it. Hop in the plane, you know, nice 747, very old, a lot of fumes pulling into the air. But nevertheless, hop into the plane and go down to Louisiana and see what's going on, because it is a mess. And the Army Corps of Engineers could have solved a lot of it. You know, they were telling me one of the big problems, the Army Corps of Engineers, under his jurisdiction for a long time, almost 8 years, had they done certain changes that everybody has been begging them to do, the floods would have been at a much, much lower level.
And you would think after Katrina that they would have figured this stuff out.
Well, they just couldn't get them to move. They said they couldn't get them to move. They wouldn't do it. They just couldn't get them to move. And you know, that's government, unless you have a leader.
All right. You know, Donald, one of the things that is happening as we're speaking is there apparently was another terror attack in Turkey. And although we don't know all of the details, what we do know and the bare facts are that it appears that there was a wedding in Turkey, and it was an outdoor wedding, and it appears that there was possibly a suicide bomb, or as many as 22 people dead. And there are reports, and you know as well as I do, that all of these things change. You know, when we first hear things, they may not necessarily be true, but what would you do as president to stem all of these attacks and you know, the tide of these kinds of attacks?
Well, we have to be much tougher than we are right now. We have to be less politically correct. We have to be so vigilant with respect to other people reporting, people in the community reporting what's going on. I heard about the attack in Turkey. It looks like it's radical Islamic terrorism again, and I'm sure, of course, no, the president won't use that term. But it looks like that, and we'll have to find out. But, you know, I'm sure you wouldn't be totally shocked if it was.
Well,
but
certainly.
It is just a horrible thing that's going on. Nobody's seen anything like this. I mean, you go back to medieval times when they chopped off heads. It's like nobody's seen what we're seeing now, drowning in steel cages, chopping off heads, burying in sand. Nobody's seen this, Jeanine. This is medieval times.
It is barbaric. You know, Donna, one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to be going next to Dinish D'Souza, who did the movie Hillary's America,
right,
which is a discussion of some of the things that you've talked about in terms of the inner city and Democrats and what has happened to a lot of the people in the inner cities. And I hope that you're able to see that movie, because it's very interesting, very consistent with where you're going. And I'm going to ask you one last kind of fun question.
Go ahead.
All right. As you prep for these debates, who's standing in for Hillary?
Well, you know, so far I have not really given it too much thought. I didn't prep for the other debates and the primaries. I studied for them, but I didn't really prep per se. I guess the standard thing is you would be a very, very good. You are something.
I was going to offer myself up, but I work for Fox, and everybody knows I love you, so everybody knows we're friends. But I'm not blonde, so I don't think it would work.
I know. That's
Plus,
right.
I don't wear pantsuits.
But we'll get somebody, I guess. But you know, the main thing is, I just think it's something we have to win. We have to win that election, or we're not going to have the judges. You know, the justices of the Supreme Court, by and of themselves, is such a big factor in this election, and it's a factor that some people talk about a lot because they know how important. Other people don't know about it. But you will have, hey, look, Justice Scalia, who that was unexpected, but all of a sudden, before you even start, you're picking one. But it could be as many as 4, could even be as many as 5 during a 4-year term, probably the most ever for a president for a 4-year term. So we will work hard, and we will do a job, and we will make America great again.
All right. I want to say one more thing. This is just coming across. LA Times poll. Trump takes a half-a-point lead over Clinton.
Oh, wow. That's very good.
So you have had a banner week after a rough couple of weeks.
Well, I don't know. The press gave me a rough couple of weeks. They'll take what I say, and they will change it and totally cut it up and dice it up and then say... and then study it for 3 days.
Yeah, but you know what, Donald?
Very dishonest.
Just keep doing what you did this week. You hit it out of the park.
I will, Jeanine. I will.
Donald Trump, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jeanine. Thank you.
And if you haven't seen Hillary's America, the latest effort from writer and director Dinish D'Souza, it is an eye-opening look at the Democratic candidate for president, as well as the party that she represents. Take a look at this.
Today claim to be the party of progress. But where's the progress? For blacks, they've created new urban plantations. For Indians, reservations. For poor immigrants, barrios, ghettos, and slums. They put their voters in there and make sure they stay there. The only progress we see is progress for them. More wealth, more power, more control over America, over our lives. The Clintons are worthy successors of a tradition from Andrew Jackson through Woodrow Wilson.
Wow. With me now, author and director of Hillary's America, Dinesh D'Souza. Dinesh, I have to tell you, I have seen that twice. And my hat's off to you, and you know how much I think of that movie, and I even have the book. I read it, and I even, you know, talked to Donald Trump about it. I thought it was an incredible discussion. And what I don't think most Americans realize is the history of the Democrat Party as it relates to slavery, the taking away of Indian lands, putting Indians on reservations, and as it relates to civil rights in this country. Now, I don't want to get into a long discussion of it, but I want to talk to you about the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. So tell me about those amendments and how they were voted on as it relates to Democrats and Republicans.
Well, the 13th Amendment was the amendment that permanently abolished slavery. The Republicans pushed it. The Democrats unanimously, as a bloc, opposed it. But it passed. The 14th Amendment granted equal rights under the law. If I'm not mistaken, not a single Democrat voted for it.
Right.
The Republicans once again got it through. The 15th Amendment was the right to vote. Republicans pushed it through. The Democrats again in uniform opposition. Now, why is this important? It's important because Democrats today will claim credit for the civil rights movement of the 1960s. The Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65. But those laws were all based upon constitutional provisions that have been put into the Constitution 100 years previously by the Republican Party, and their enforcement had been blocked for almost a century by the Democratic Party. So that's why this history is so important. The Democrats to this day claim to be the party of the good guys, of the little guys, of minorities, of women. Now, the real history is that the Democrats blocked women's suffrage.
Yeah.
They were the party of the Ku Klux Klan. They were the party of immigration restrictions,
Dinesh,
forced sterilization.
Dinesh, nobody believes that. If I went out and did my man on the street, not that they're geniuses out there, but I asked them, everybody would swear on their homes that the Republicans are the ones who are the KKK and all that. Why?
Well, the funny thing is that once they see our movie, what the left is now saying is, yes, Dinesh, we admit it. You're right. It's true. But it's ancient history. It's all so long ago. Women's suffrage was 100 years ago. And I say, wait a minute. We're not just talking about women's suffrage. In the 1960s, chauvinist Democrats tried to kill the Civil Rights Act of 1964 with a gender amendment. It backfired. But all of this is not as far back in the past as you think. And the reason it's important to highlight it is it shows the Democratic narrative to be a lie, and it strips the moral capital away from the Democratic Party.
All right, let me ask you then, in terms of the opening statement and the inner cities and the Democrat Party and the issue of crime, and we're going to be going to David Clarke. How is it that the Democrat Party, in terms of your perspective, is continuing the crime issue and not creating a safe haven for the minority community?
So in the book and the movie, I use a controversial phrase. It's the democratic urban plantation. And the reason I use that phrase is that there are so many chilling similarities between the old slave plantations, the rural plantations that the Democratic Party used to run, and what's going on in the inner cities. So in the old slave plantations, if you look at what life was like, you had ramshackle dwellings, broken families, a lot of illegitimacy, a lot of violence necessary to hold the place together because slavery was based on coercion. Everybody had a meager living. You'd get health care, for example, but no one ever got ahead. A lot of nihilism, a lot of hopelessness, a lot of despair.
Sounds
well,
like
that's
today.
Exactly what you see today,
All right.
Not just for inner city blacks, by the way.
Coming
you see
up
it
against
on
the break. Dinesh, we'll get your book. Dinesh D'Souza, thanks for being with us. You heard Donald Trump and I talking about law and order in America. My next guest calls progressive policies a total disaster, not only for his home city of Milwaukee, but for many other major cities across the United States. Here to discuss what needs to be done before it's too late, Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clarke. All right, good evening, Sheriff. You know, we have been talking so far this evening on the problems of the urban community, the inner cities as it relates to poverty, crime. We're seeing it act out in real time every day in this country. And with Dinesh D'Souza, we saw the history of it that doesn't seem to change from generation to generation. Now, you have been in law enforcement and you are close up in real time to what has happened in Milwaukee. How do you interpret what's going on, and do you see it changing in the near future?
Well, I don't see it changing in the near future because the political class won't change. Milwaukee is under control by the progressive liberal Democrats. Their failed urban policies have wrecked the city of Milwaukee, the city that I grew up in, the city that I was raised in and have been a part in for all of my life. Milwaukee used to be a strong middle-class city. Strong middle class, a lot of jobs, good education system. That's all been flipped over the last 50 years. We're now the 6th poorest city in America for a city of its size, with 1 in every 4 people living in poverty. You have a failing K-12 public education system, one of the worst in the nation. You have massive black unemployment. You have dysfunctional families. All of this has been exacerbated under this progressive idea of how to run cities. Look, the progressive rule of these cities has wrecked these cities, and not just Milwaukee. You look at Baltimore, you mentioned them. Donald Trump mentioned them. Dinesh D'Souza mentioned it as well. Baltimore, you look at St. Louis, you look at L.A. Chicago's on the brink right now as well. Until there's a change in the political class, and that's not going to happen too soon in Milwaukee. That's why I say I don't see things changing. All they're doing right now as we speak, is these same progressive Democrats have their hands out looking to Washington for more federal money.
Sheriff, what needs to be done? Look, you and I can sit here and say, look, bad people need to be arrested, guns need to be stopped, gun trafficking, throw them in jail, all that stuff. But what else needs to be done?
You need to shrink the size of the underclass. The underclass has grown significantly in Milwaukee. How do you shrink the size of the underclass? Stop funding all of this dysfunction. Stop funding this growth of government in the lives of people in Milwaukee. That's where the Republicans can help. They can step in, not with more money, but to slowly, because you can't pull the rug out from people, and you know, that'd be a cruel thing to do. Slowly start to defund this dysfunction and tie any more federal money to achievement, for accomplishment. In other words, the poverty rate is as such in Milwaukee. If it doesn't go down in the next 3-5 years, less money. If it doesn't go down after that, less money, because eventually what will happen in the American ghetto, look, black people are resilient. We've overcome slavery. We've overcome Jim Crow. We have not been able to overcome modern liberalism and the progressive liberal movement. That's been a stifling thing for us. We have not figured that out, but they will if they're made to stand up on their own 2 feet, figure some of these things out for themselves, realize they are being hoodwinked by the Democrat Party. I find it encouraging that Donald Trump went out there and pleaded. He asked for the vote of the black community all throughout the United States.
What do you have to lose?
I find that unique.
It is unique in the whole paradigm. I mean, the whole discussion was unique. Not even mentioning the schools and the failed system of schooling, where these kids are dropping out and failing and, you know, just being, you know, self-fulfilling, that they're not going anywhere. Sheriff David Clarke, thanks so much for being with us this evening. All right.
My pleasure, Judge.
The best political panel around is on deck. Chris Hahn and John Thomas standing by to talk the Donald, Hillary, and the big push to November. And then, are Trump voters staying under wraps until Election Day because of the liberal media? I'll explain my theory and talk about it with an expert as justice rolls on. Stay with us. Another big week for both campaigns as scandal continues to plague the Clinton camp, and yet another staff shakeup dominates the Trump headlines. Here to break it all down, my political panel, former senior aide to Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer, Chris Hahn, and Republican consultant John Thomas. Good evening, gentlemen.
Thanks,
okay, let's start with the flooding. I'll start with you, Chris. Now, The Democrats and the mainstream media couldn't wait to go after President George Bush with Katrina. At least the man showed up. He may have been 30,000 feet up, but at least he showed up. Donald Trump runs to Louisiana, and Barack Obama, with no plans, no criticisms, no one saying anything about it. After Trump goes, Barack Obama says, "Oh, I'll go next week."
Well, the Louisiana authorities might question whether or not it was wise for him to be there, and they're also very satisfied with the federal response, which is a big difference between Katrina and now.
Oh, wait a minute.
But,
so while he's playing golf, you think those people who lost their homes are I lost a home in a flood. I'm not happy with the federal response.
Hold on a second. The governor of Louisiana did not want the president of the United States to go there because when the president comes, it is rather disruptive. He wanted to get the situation under control. And then why
did a Republican in New Jersey want the president to come?
Well, it's the same reason why George Bush didn't land, and he was unfairly criticized for not landing. It was the federal response that was a problem.
Oh, I'll let you get away with it because you said George Bush was unfairly criticized. I want you to make a note of this. All my viewers, all you Justice viewers, the first time a Democrat has ever taken George Bush's side. All right, there he is on the golf course.
For his bad response, though.
John Thomas. All right, I'm going to ask you this now. The ransom. Was it a ransom? And we've got this, I'm going to ask you to look at this shot. John Kirby, let's pull up this sound.
In basic English, you're saying that you wouldn't give them the $400 million in cash until the prisoners were released, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, the next day, Kirby comes out, and Chris, you'll get a charge out of this. Kirby comes out. His eyes are bloodshot. He didn't sleep all night, he didn't, and he tried to walk it back. He basically said it was a ransom is a ransom, but the president says, and I got to read this, the president says, well, very smug, by the way, it wasn't some nefarious deal that we explained that Iran pressed a claim in an international tribunal, he says, and the lawyer said we had to pay it. What do you think it was, John?
It was a ransom. If it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it was a ransom. But here's what's most offensive about it, Judge, is not only did they lie about it, but the United States, because of that $400 million transfer and the Iran deal, is the world's largest sponsor of terrorism, if you think about it. The disastrous policies of the last 8 years, and by extension, Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, got us into the situation we are today. And that's what this race has to be about, because Americans know we are worse off and less safe than we were 8 years ago.
Here's the bottom line, Chris. Americans aren't going to care about this or that or this or that. We can say till the cows come home, we should care about this and that. It's just that little piece in the middle. All right, because in terms of presidential elections, we've never had people so despised, and I'm going to talk about that in my next block. What is it going to take to convince the middle that one candidate or the other is worth following? And I don't need to hear about how Donald had a bad week or Hillary had a bad week, because right now, Donald had a great week. He's up, according to LA Times, a half a point. I mean, this is a very fluid situation.
Look, I'm not one of those people who think that this race is over. I've been saying this to you. I've been saying it to others for weeks that, Donald Trump could turn 6 points around in a day. But that said, I think what the American people want is they want somebody that they can trust with their future and their security, not just their economic security, but the actual security of this nation. They want somebody who's got the right temperament to lead this country. Both of them have very high unfavorables. One of them, though, appears to most Americans to be more likely to understand what the job is. That's why the debates are so important. That's why when he said earlier on your show that he's not preparing for the debates, I would be very concerned with that if I was a Donald Trump person.
Well, hey, he was winging it in the primary. But, John, let me ask you that. What is the key word that Chris just said they have to be able to trust?
That's exactly what I was about to say, Judge. I said I couldn't agree with Chris in this instance more. Trust is the issue, and trust is Hillary Clinton's problem. Over 70% of Americans say they not only distrust Hillary, they think she's a liar. Director Comey said she's a liar. So that's what Donald Trump has to do. That is the secret sauce in this home stretch.
That, John. Everybody knows it. That's what I'm saying.
But Judge, that we move so quickly in the news cycle that it's whatever happened last is what people remember.
You're right.
Americans don't trust politicians in general.
What happens last? Chris, what'd you say real fast? What'd you say?
Americans just don't trust politicians in general, and Americans right now see her more as a politician than him.
So why not rob a few banks? Say they figure they're not honest anyway. Chris Hahn, John Thomas, thanks for being with us. And street justice is still ahead tonight. Plus, are Donald Trump voters hiding from pollsters? I'm going to tell you why we could be in for a big surprise come November. My theory. Don't go away.
They're morally tainted. I mean, there's just no question about that. You can't say he's a racist and what he said was textbook racism, but I support him because he's the nominee of my party.
Wow. That's ABC News political commentator and Hillary Clinton fan, Cokie Roberts, talking about Donald Trump supporters. But could this media bias against Trump actually influence the polls on Election Day in the opposite way that they've been telling us, and end up being a big reason behind a Trump win? Joining me now, Vanderbilt University professor of political science and law, Carol Swain. Good evening, Professor. It is very good to have you on the show. You know, when I heard Cokie Roberts say that, I was stunned. I mean, everyone knows that Donald's my friend, that I support him. But to hear someone who works for ABC and PBS say that if I support him, I am morally tainted is shocking from the mainstream media. Now, we've heard from PBS and from, I think, some of the other mainstream outlets that, you know, it's not just the less educated. They're calling them the low information voters. I mean, there's so much editorializing. Is that the way it's supposed to be?
Well, it's certainly not the way it's supposed to be, and it's also absolutely wrong according to the data. During the spring, The Economist published a poll that showed that 43% of the Trump supporters had college degrees, and as far as the ones that have low levels of education, high school degrees or less, that's only 16% of the Republican base and a fifth of the Trump supporters. And so it's really misinformation. I think Mr. Trump draws from all sectors of society, including women. During the primaries, he never got less than 25% of the female vote in those states where he won.
Are the Democrats relying on a self-fulfilling prophecy where if you say something long enough, people not only believe it, but they follow it?
Well, I think it's that Saul Alinsky strategy of using ridicule to embarrass people. And so they have set up a situation where there are people that are supporting Donald Trump, but they're afraid to share that information. And I have met so many people, and this is anecdotal data, I've met so many people that are Democrats or highly educated colleagues that tell me that they whisper that they're going to vote for Donald Trump. And I know that for myself, I am a Trump supporter now.
But
I
you've
didn't
been
start
a
off
Democrat.
as a Trump supporter. But, I mean, I had to really think about it. You know, I'm educated, so I'm supposed to support someone, you know, that, according to the media and within the Republican Party, it was assumed that, of course, you would support either Ted Cruz or Rubio or someone more acceptable. And I think that the Trump support is underestimated and that people are afraid to put bumper stickers on their cars and yard signs in their yards because they know.
We may be surprised at the election. But let's talk about one other issue quickly. Has the Democratic Party taken black voters for granted?
Of course they have, and they've done this, you know, as far as I can remember. I hope that the black community that they are already awakening. I see some of this among young people. I came out of the Democratic Party and became a Republican in 2009. I'd like to see more African Americans do that. We can't continue to do the same thing over and over and over again and expect a different result.
And ultimately, you know, in terms of the mainstream media and, you know, propelling this belief or this concept that, you know, there's no way Donald can win and he's going to ruin everything. I mean, you know, how much impact do you think that has on someone and on the voters in general?
I think it discourages people and it makes them wonder whether or not it's true. But I believe we're going to have a surprise on Election Day. I actually believe that Donald Trump is going to be our next president, and I believe that he will be a good president because his approach will be different. The bureaucracy has been in shambles for decades, and it needs the hand of someone that knows something about business. And there are just so many other areas where we do need someone that's going to infuse Washington with new people and a new way of thinking.
All right, Carol Swain, thanks so much for being with us this evening. And it's almost that time. Street Justice is next. You've waited for it all night, and it's finally time for Street Justice. Okay, so this week I hit the streets to ask about the Ryan Lochte robbery controversy, and if you think Lochte and his fellow Olympians should face charges in Brazil, take a look.
They call him the ugly American. I personally think he's rather good looking. But what should happen to Ryan Lochte?
Well, I think he should be prosecuted for what he did.
You think he should end up... You think the guy should end up in jail in Brazil?
I don't think he should be prosecuted, but I do think he should be held accountable for his actions. But I think that he should possibly do community service and pay some type of fine.
I mean, he's representing our country, so in the long run, he's got to do what he has to do as an Olympian.
I think he was, they had a little bit too much to drink maybe one night, and the locals got after him a little bit. He panicked in a different country with all the stuff that's going on there, and I don't know. Probably would have done the same thing.
Brazil wants to charge him with a crime. Should we send him back to face charges?
I don't think he should be sent back unless there's evidence to justify them putting him there.
He's a pretty good-looking model. I think he should be on television.
He's not ugly at all. But should he go to jail?
No, not when you look that good.
No? Okay, so...
I think keep him out of jail.
Good looks are a defense.
Good looks are in.
Okay, you got that? The feds and everybody else, the IRS. Can you shine these shoes?
Those are amazing shoes. They don't need a shine. He should be banned from competition for going to any other country forever.
No! Why?
He's a liar.
But see, here's the thing. First thing he did was told his mother. His mother called the press. That's how it broke.
You know, hand him over to his mother. She'll handle him.
Obviously not. She screwed the whole thing up. She called the press.
Well, the apple don't fall far from the tree.
If his mother didn't tell the press, it would never have gotten out.
Well, his mother's right to tell him, but she should have brought him up a little better before that.
They said that he lied to the police in Rio.
If he lies to the police, they should hang him.
That penalty. Where are you from? Let me guess.
You don't have to guess. Already you know.
I do know.
I love you.
Where are we going with this interview?
Which interview? This is a world led by a woman. And you are having a new woman president.
No.
Yes.
No.
She is doing well.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes, again.
Let's see who wins. All right, what are your final words to Ryan Lochte?
My final words are just tell the truth, be honest, and don't fabricate what really happened.
Do better. Represent us better when you are overseas.
Stop drinking. We'll be right back. Thanks so much for sharing your night with me this evening. Remember, friend me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Judge_Jeanine. Make sure to tune in tomorrow night for a special Sunday edition of Justice at 9 p.m. Thanks so much for your loyalty. Thanks so much for watching. The Greg Gutfeld Show is next. See you tomorrow night.